To order the regular meeting, the Planning and Transportation Commission, today, Wednesday, November 29th. Can we take the roll call, please?
Vice Chair Chang? Here. Commissioner Aiken?
Here.
Commissioner Heckman?
Here.
Commissioner Liu?
Here.
Commissioner Rectal?
Here.
Commissioner Templeton? Here. We have a quorum.
Thank you. All right. First order of business is public comment. Members of the public may speak to any item not on the agenda. Do we have speaker cards?
Yes, we have one from David Hirsch. So David Hirsch and Peter Balte.
Okay. And so my understanding is that they'll take 6 minutes to speak together. Is that correct?
So I should say an introduction before you start the clock.
Okay.
So the subject matter is why Palo Alto should create a development office to be responsive to the state's housing development requirements. And I just want to say that the first part of this presentation is based on my personal experience, but the entire content represents our mutual and coordinated realization and commitment, Peter and mine. So you want to start the clock? That's good. Oops. Now? This always happens. I'm sorry. Okay. So when I completed graduate school and returned to New York, I had the opportunity to work with a group of motivated architects, planners, and transportation engineers who saw the need for a more radical urban design methodology to lift up a rundown area of downtown Brooklyn. In the several years I was there, we revamped the entire major shopping center into a busway with many pedestrian amenities. We proposed a zoning change in the four-story neighboring streets as a denser mid-rise housing around the commercial core. We extended the shopping areas to ultimately include big box stores. We interested Chase Bank to relocate much of their back office space to a new high-rise structure near the shopping street. And we began improvements to the nearby East River waterfront, including a floating restaurant and a parklet, an area which was later broadly developed to become hugely successful landscape riverfront park with expansive views of lower Manhattan. The basic principle of our special development office was to comprehensively modify and revitalize a major deteriorated downtown area and alter outdated zoning by championing innovative, action-oriented, forward-thinking development concepts. The creative model, and this is really important, the creative model or development plan must come first. The zoning follows, with regulations provided in what's called an urban design zoning overlay. There are many examples of this successful procedure. To note, one is Los Angeles's whole center city was an overlay scheme. I suggest that Palo Alto needs the same kind of actionable program guided by separate development office in a partnership with planning, because we are tasked by the state to provide more than 6,000 units of new housing, which increases the population by nearly 22%, and which, if undirected, will have a significant impact on our community's quality of life. Let me give you an example of this. What is it that we're going to have to build? Realize that if you have 25 projects, 250 units each, that's 6,250 units, times an average apartment size of 800 square feet, that's more than 5 million square feet, times more than $400 per square foot that's probably low by today's standards. That's a grand total of $2 billion. Enormous cost, many more projects than are presently processed by planning or constructed in any 8-year period, and does not include the many other projects that will continue to burden the planning department. It's up on the board, huh? Is there, oh, there, yeah. As one response to the obvious impending housing deluge, fellow ARB board member Peter and I developed a study more than 2.5 years ago now of the 29 open parking lots in the adjacent to 29 parking lots adjacent to our downtowns. We proposed to the previous council a fully developed architectural scheme for the Hamilton lot behind CVS. That's what's up on the board here in front of you. This retains the entire capacity of the present parking in a well-lit basement below 5-story housing. Buildings with a potential of 80 to 100 units above on this 3/4 acre lot. It was our hope that the council would see this study as an appropriate method of determining how to maximize the city potential, parking lot size as the housing, while being sensitive to the specific context. That is, the AT&T building next door. So you can see in the scheme what our intention is. We again recommit to this opportunity, noting that it is relevant to the immense task ahead and that there needs to be a development office to define and to proactively direct this process. We note that the 29 city parking lots are ideal for development because they are owned by the city and could be leased rather than sold, leased to private developers. Rather than, if they were purchased, they were extremely high cost of land in the downtown areas. And I think it would be prohibitive to have housing in the downtown because of the cost of the land. This will be a huge attraction to developers whose biggest initial cost is the purchase of property. We would expect that a development office would, as their first determination, show the council a proper presentation of all of the 29 parking lots, describing their potential schematically as housing. Because the downtowns are a unique mixed-use development area, physically separated from our single-family residential zones, and because all of the parking lots are PF zones owned by the city, and finally, because these areas are a mixed fabric of larger block buildings, more massive structures, and adjacent to low-rise, smaller structures, the guidelines for development can be tailored to this varied nature and scale based on the following comments. Public parking capacity maintained and accessibility and high quality of parking facilities. Site planning and building bulk plan to relate to existing neighboring building volumes. Context of the development directed to respect the diversity of building typologies. Mix of income levels to be controlled by city requirements. Downtown streetscape standards maintained, aesthetic quality control of each project guaranteed because of city ownership. Apartment size and distribution based on proven percentage of needs, percentage of location of commercial uses based on specific neighborhood considerations. These should be noted as only the first list of considerations. We would expect the development office to expand this as needed.
Can you wrap it up, Mr. Hirsch? Please?
Yes, I'm just about to finish up. Final paragraph. Clearly, this response to the state's requirements is a very, very big task. We need a dedicated group of architects, urban designers, planners, and transportation engineers, plus a leader with development experience. It is reason to expect that some existing staff would be reassigned to work with this group. There's no time to waste. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Dow, do we have additional speakers?
That's it for oral communications.
Thank you. Okay, on to agenda changes, additions, and deletions.
There are no changes for this evening.
Great. Then city official reports, please.
Yes. So we do have the upcoming PTC items in the staff report packet today. We are adding one more item to December 13th, just in time for our notices regarding some carryover sites. So that's a topic that we will be talking about next time, as well as a couple of current planning projects. So next meeting will be a bit longer. And then we have been informed that we are going to be working towards a joint meeting with the City Council in February to talk about the housing element revisions necessary to respond to the Office of Housing and Community Development. So looking towards February 12th as a potential date for that meeting. If you could check your calendars and get back to me as to your availability. If this works out, then we would cancel the February 14th meeting and I'll have a nice Valentine's Day. Other matters, we have recent council action on several ordinances, 3 ordinances. Rental registry program, and thanks to Commissioner Aiken for attending. That passed through the City Council. We had an interim ordinance pass regarding the outdoor retail through extending that through 2024. And we had the Stanford University Medical Center ordinance for the development agreement. So all of those were on Monday. A lot to come back to after Thanksgiving. And then coming up, matters that the Planning Commission has participated in, the safe parking ordinance is scheduled for December 4th. And I believe Member Liu is the December rep. So then on December 11th, the Ellsworth Planned Community item has been targeted for that date. And then let's see, there's nothing on the 18th at this point that I'm aware of that will require Planning and Transportation Commission representation. And I think we have, do we have Sylvia tonight for transportation items? Okay, all right.
Hi, good evening, commissioners. We actually don't have a report for you tonight, but for a director's report, but we do have an item that we are bringing to you tonight. So just wanted to say hello. Back to you, Amy.
So that concludes the director's report.
Do any members of the commission have questions? All right. On to the first agenda item for tonight, which is a study session on the bicycle and pedestrian transportation plan update. And if we could start with the staff presentation, please.
Yes, and let me just quickly introduce myself. My name is Ozzy Arce. I'm a senior transportation planner with the Office of Transportation. Happy to be here with you all tonight to present the city's update to the bicycle and pedestrian transportation plan, locally known as the BPTP update. We have with us tonight Sylvia, who you just saw, as well as Amanda from Kittleson and Associates, the consultant on this project, who's been great to work with. Just wanted to also high level let you all know that tonight's presentation, there's no action. It's simply a soft introduction to the effort. And at later phases of the project, which Amanda will go through, we will get more into the details, into the weeds, and there'll be opportunities for PTC to help shape the priority projects and ultimately the draft and final plan. So at this time, we just have a quick flyover presentation of what the project overview is, kind of our roadmap, and again, ways that PTC can get involved. Appreciate the help with the slide advancement. Next slide, please. Again, just wanted to do a quick flyover of the presentation, and I will also be standing online, but I will definitely pass it over to Amanda, who's online, to lead us through this presentation. Thank you.
Shall I pick it up from here, Ozzy?
Please.
Okay, great. We can go to the next slide. Thanks. And hey, everyone. Once again, I'm Amanda Leahy. I am an associate planner with Kittleson and Associates, and I'm the project manager of the consultant team supporting this work. Today, really, as Ozzy mentioned, want to give you an introduction to the project as well as an overview of what we see as your role and responsibilities. So we'll be coming to you 3 times over the course of the plan. We're talking today about the project context and background, the engagement activities, and we'll also share some next steps. The next time we see you will be in May or June, and we'll be going through our existing conditions analysis, the results of the technical work that we've done. And then again, we'll come to you in fall of 2024 to talk through the project recommendations as well as prioritization and implementation. And we would really appreciate your input and feedback on materials that we share with you. And I'm looking forward to the study session today to hear your vision and goals for this plan, as well as share what we have in our scope. So next slide, please. So again, today we'll just be providing an overview of the project and key milestones and establishing our understanding and expectations for your involvement. Next steps. This plan is really a critical planning, policy, and implementation document that supports efforts to improve the safety and attractiveness of walking, biking, and rolling as a means of transportation and recreation in the city. The main objectives of this update are to seek community feedback to evaluate implementation progress from the previous plans and adjust recommendations for new policies, facilities, and programs, and to determine the appropriate criteria and metrics to prioritize those recommendations for implementation. This update will also explore the role of emerging transportation technologies. So we're using an expanded definition of biking and walking. We're considering e-bikes and micro-mobility devices, and really trying to establish a big picture planning view, a big vision to expand bicycling and walking for all users in the city. And this is also done in support and consistent with the city's 2030 comprehensive plan, the sustainability and climate action plan, and a safe system approach. Next slide. And speaking of safe system approaches, just want to talk about the similarities and differences between 2 planning processes going on right now. So I'm here today talking about the bicycle and pedestrian transportation plan update. You may have heard or be about to hear about the Safe Streets for All action plan. These are both multi-year mobility-focused planning documents with a shared vision of enhancing safety and accessibility on the streets. They both have a focus on vulnerable road users, and by that I mean people walking and biking, older adults and children, people who are more likely to be killed when they're traveling around our streets. But there are some key differences. This plan will focus on walking and biking and rolling, focusing on active and sustainable travel, and also considers streets as well as off-street paths and trails. And this plan will culminate in a set of recommended programs, policies, and infrastructure recommendations to support walking and biking. The Safe Streets for All action plan will also look at vehicle collisions and vehicle travels, and will be developing recommendations to proactively implement safety measures that eliminate traffic deaths and injuries for all modes. They'll also be conducting an equity analysis as part of that work. Next slide. This plan update process began about 4 months ago and will be carried out over the next year and a half. We're currently developing the vision and goals and commencing work to understand the existing needs and concerns related to walking and biking in the city, and also look at how those have changed since the prior update, which was about 10 years ago. Next summer, we'll be developing recommendations for those infrastructure projects and programs and policy changes that support active transportation. And we're aiming to take a final plan to council for adoption in about 18 months. Next slide. Next slide. Over the next 18 months, we'll have multiple touch points across 3 phases of engagement, and those are shown on this slide. Each phase will include a series of working group and committee or commission meetings. So in addition to the Planning and Transportation Commission, we will meet with the Pedestrian and Bicycle Advisory Committee. We actually met with them earlier this month. We'll be meeting tomorrow with the City School Transportation Safety Committee and with the Rail Committee next Tuesday. And then we're also getting a City Council meeting scheduled or getting on the agenda likely end of January or early February. And in addition to these standing committees and commissions, we've convened an interagency staff working group whom we met with earlier this month and will also be guiding this technical work. In the first visioning phase, we've also created a project website and an interactive map, and hopefully you all have seen those and maybe plugged in some comments. We've gotten a lot of engagement already over the past few months, and we'll be keeping that live for another month. We have also participated in partnership with the SS4A team on a safety survey that they've released, so we'll be sharing information and using that to also inform our work. And we participated in the Bike Palo Alto event the 1st of October. To round out this first phase, we'll be holding a visioning workshop. I think we just got that scheduled for January 31st. And that will be a community meeting, virtual, to talk through a vision and basically create a vision statement along with the community. In the second phase, we will include more in-person meetings, and we'll be going to some community events, neighborhood meetings, and also host project-specific design charrettes and walk audits. And we'll be conducting a public survey, and again, meeting with the committee and commission and working groups. In the third and final phase, we will do one more round of committee and working group meetings and have one larger public meeting to talk through recommendations and prioritization. Next slide. This is an illustration of that map I mentioned earlier. You can see some of the comments we got early on, and then some photos from the Bike Palo Alto event, which was well attended, and we got good input and engagement there. Next slide. Thank you. So we've also had a number of background and context analyses completed. We have reviewed over 20 planning documents and started to develop an updated inventory of existing programs and policies that are relevant to walking and biking, and identify the gaps or needs that could be addressed by the plan. We've completed a demographic analysis and conducted a bicycle-friendly community assessment, which I will share some highlights with you later on. Looking ahead, we will be completing a bicycle level of traffic stress analysis, and bicycle level of traffic stress, or LTS, is a rating given to a road segment or crossing that indicates the stress it imposes on a bicyclist, basically how comfortable or not it is to be on that street. The ratings range from 1 to 4, with 1 being a low stress facility, 4 being a high stress facility. And the analysis is very data intensive, so it considers roadway functional classification, vehicle volume, posted and prevailing speeds, number of vehicle lanes, presence of on-street parking, vehicle parking and bike lane widths. And also at intersections, it looks at the right turn lane configuration and length. So whether it's a mixing zone for bicyclists or whether bicyclists have a separated approach. And it also looks at vehicle turning speeds and presence of median refuge islands. So we are currently collecting all of the data and creating our existing facilities inventory so that we can conduct this LTS analysis and map the low stress and high stress parts of the city. And we'll be using that to inform the locations as well as the types of treatments and facilities we'll recommend to ultimately create a low stress network that allows people of all ages and abilities and skill levels to ride a bike and access different parts of town. We'll also be conducting an analysis of barriers, looking at freeways and creeks and rail lines and barriers near transit, like gaps in sidewalks, to understand the locations and types of treatments that will help create more direct connections and reduce the length of walking trips for people walking. We'll be conducting a safety and collision analysis that spatially looks at collision data and identifies fatal and severe injury collisions to develop the high injury network for people walking and biking. The SS4A team will also be creating a high injury network, but that one will include vehicle collisions again. So they'll be slightly different, though I do expect a bit of overlap. And we'll be doing a network screening to look at high risk locations and corridors in the city. And finally, for the technical analysis, we'll be looking at where people are walking and biking and estimating existing and future potential or latent demand for walking and biking to help us understand where the most benefit might be in investing in the network. All right, next slide. This is an illustration of documents reviewed and the topics for the literature review that I mentioned. I expect many of you are familiar with these plans. We were looking to, again, establish that baseline understanding of existing policies and programs related to active transportation and needs and issues and concerns raised in previous relevant plans that we might want to consider in our work. Next slide. This is an illustration of the draft facilities inventory. We're currently gathering feedback on this map. We know that the data sets we were working with were incomplete, and before we started that analysis, we wanted to make sure we had corrected all of the errors or omissions that just happen when you have 10 years of a network built out and the GIS data basically just doesn't keep up. So we're collecting feedback through these committee and commission working groups, and we'll be incorporating and addressing those comments and have a final map for the analysis at the end of this month. Next slide. And getting to the end of the presentation here, just wanted to share some highlights from the bicycle friendly community review that we conducted. So the bicycle friendly community is a designation that the League of American Bicyclists gives. Cities apply and they evaluate the application, and the intent is really to reward excellence and raise standards for what constitutes a bicycle friendly environment. Palo Alto has been a bicycle-friendly community since 2003 and a gold level community since 2010. And of course, wants to do better, right? So we're trying to understand how Palo Alto could progress up to platinum. And we took a look at what future opportunities might be based on a new application that the league has developed, and found that increasing the overall mileage of bicycle network with a specific gap in building out the low stress network, as well as increasing high quality bike parking and expanding education efforts were strategies and opportunities that we should be looking at with this plan as well. All right, I'll turn it over to Ozzy now for next steps and to get us started with Q&A.
Thanks, Amanda. And we can come back to this slide if folks want to talk through these opportunities and areas of excellence. But just to close this out, we are, again, not just ramping up, we're in full motion here with phase 1 roadshow and going before different bodies, as well as gathering our data for our existing facilities map and our existing conditions analysis, which we will present to folks come spring, including PTC, which will be the next time that we come before you. Again, like Amanda mentioned, we're deep in developing that technical analysis for the map, as well as the conditions analysis, and working through our roadshow currently, and looking to start publicizing that community visioning workshop that we are looking to host on January 31st of next year. It will be a virtual workshop, so look out for the publicity on that starting soon. And then just, I think one thing I forgot to mention at the beginning is the last time the city updated its plan was in 2012. And I know this is something that the city has been wanting to do for several years. And so we're excited to get this effort going. And as Amanda noted, many cities are looking at this from a wider scope and not just focusing on the bicycle and pedestrian efforts, and looking at other wheel and transportation options such as e-bikes, which grew during the pandemic, and micromobility, as well as e-scooters. So I'll conclude the presentation there. But again, tonight we're just wanted to present the effort, give you all a sense of where we're heading with this roadmap, and hear just your preliminary thoughts on where your headspace is in terms of, again, the slide that outlines those areas of excellence and areas for opportunity as we're looking to reach a platinum level rated bicycle friendly community. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any members of the commission have clarifying questions before we move to public comment? All right. Commissioner Aiken, is that a light that you had on from the beginning, or?
That was an accident.
Okay.
Apologies.
And then Commissioner Liu.
Just a few technical questions to start off with. Can you talk a little bit more about the League of American Bicyclists and really what value we get from being gold to platinum? Is that tied to any funding, or is that just something we do to benchmark ourselves?
Right. I'll start, and then Amanda, please dive into more on the league. I know that the city has, through the SCAP or even through the comp plan, has goals, whether literal metrics that you see in the SCAP or just active mobility goals that we hope to address via reaching a platinum level. So it's just, while it's not necessarily stated in, let's say, a goal currently, I know that that's something that we're looking to strive to do in our efforts to reach those SCAP and comp plan goals. But Amanda, if you want to dive further into the league and the designations that they provide.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is more a point of pride than anything, I would say, the designation itself, but it speaks to more than that. The league itself is a member-supported group. They have over 200,000 members across the country, mostly advocacy and bike groups. But the work they do is pretty wide-ranging, and their biking knowledge is pretty deep. And so the scorecard that they've developed really is an excellent benchmarking tool. There are, I think, almost 1,000 cities that have applied, and not all of them get awarded a status. It allows us to see how Palo Alto ranks against peer cities. For example, one of the metrics they look at is mode share. Palo Alto, I think, is pretty high right now, but not quite platinum level. So platinum level cities have a 14% mode share, which reflects the quality of the infrastructure as well as the community members themselves. But so a valuable benchmarking tool, and like the criteria they use again are metrics like that are pretty like proven and useful tools for understanding how well the city is performing.
Got it. Makes sense. And I recognize how useful it can be to have an outside party grade our work. On page 20, there's a reference to the share of transportation budget spent on bicycling, and Palo Alto's is stated as 76%. What does that really involve, and how is that calculated?
Right. Amanda, I think that's from the lab report itself.
Yeah, that's, I was also curious about that, and I don't have the insider look into the calculation. So that would have been provided in the application. Sylvia's off mute. Do you know something?
Hi. Yes, thanks for the question, Commissioner. Yeah, that was something that we put together as part of our application for our last certification. And I think we looked at our CIP budget to see which projects had something to do with bicycling. And since almost everything we do has something to do with bicycling, we counted it. And so that's how we got that really high number.
Okay. Maybe one last question just about the potential goal of being a platinum community. It seems like maybe one of the most important criteria is just the mileage of the bicycle network. And we're at 33%, whereas an average platinum community is seemingly at 80%. Is there any realistic path to, or like, is that metric seemingly as important as I would intuitively expect it to be? And if we can't get it close to 80%, is there any path to actually even become platinum?
Right. I think we're slowly trying to get our efforts going through plans like this. But I think, Amanda, if you can speak to the weight that these different categories carry, and specifically how much the one around the mileage of active transportation facilities.
Yeah, it is a good question. I can't say the exact weighting of it. I can say that that bicycle boulevards and slow streets, neighborhood greenways, I see as another opportunity for the city, and that can account for a lot of mileage while being pretty infrastructure light. So I think there is a pathway to getting that number. I also think that number isn't a target. And I think that if the city performs well in other ways, that is not really, like, that's not the objective.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Can I take a stab at that too?
Yeah, of course.
Thanks. When they came to visit us for the last, either the last application or the application before that, I think it was the application before that, they came actually in between. So they came prior to our last application. They came to see, they did a tour. They were shocked at the number of students who biked and walked to school here. And that visit actually helped change their scoring criteria for bicycle-friendly communities. So your question is a great one. And we've also helped the league expand their criteria. And so, and because I think we should, anyway, I had a great conversation with the league representative saying, where are our points for safe routes to school? So, so that was fun. Anyway, I just wanted to say that, they do change their criteria, as they see good ideas getting implemented.
Okay,
So it's
thank
not
you.
all about the mileage. Thanks.
Got it. Thank you. I have a few other questions, but I'll hold them for the next round.
All right, Commissioner Templeton.
Thank you. As always, I want to thank this team for working on this, putting this together, and our city staff for encouraging all of the dialogue around bike and pedestrian activity. I think it's really important. So thank you. Thank you for bringing it to us for feedback. I get really excited about this topic, and so I'll share with you some questions that can give you some sense of where I'm going. And of course, like Commissioner Liu, we'll have some comments in the next round. So I'm looking on your slide 14, where you have the document review. And I want to talk about the Caltrans District 4 bike plan and pedestrian plan. And recently we've had a community discussion around El Camino, which is owned by Caltrans, and what kind of safety improvements we'll have in this city on sidewalks, intersection ingress and egress for the pedestrians and bikes, and what we can do to make it safer for bikes. And so I was just looking at those plans, and there's nothing in there about it. So I want to say, kudos for looking at the Caltrans information, but also an opportunity for us. I'm wondering, can we talk with them about that? Can we figure out how to put our thoughts into their report and make sure we're communicating for major thoroughfares in our city, even if we don't own the entirety of it?
Right, and I think and thank you for that. I think for us, we have and will continue to work with Caltrans on any of their facilities, including El Camino Real. I know that conversation is top of mind for folks at the moment. And what I would say is we will continue to work with Caltrans to make the improvements that I think is right for Palo Alto, understanding that it's a Caltrans facility.
Are the sidewalks indeed a Caltrans facility?
That I don't know off the top of my head.
It'd be worth looking into. I'm not sure if they are. I think I've heard they may not be. So that's one of the reasons I brought it up as part of this discussion, is to encourage you to figure out what parts are whose, because I walk on those sidewalks with my family and they could be improved. They're not the best sidewalks in the city. And even if we don't own them, I'm wondering if there's an opportunity for us to say to Caltrans, here's the things that we want to see. And that brings me to the next point, is an item that's not on this list is any kind of Grand Boulevard stance from the city of Palo Alto. Other cities nearby have it and we do not. And I think that's a missing item. That's an opportunity for us to have dialogue about that street, about El Camino, with the state.
I hear that. And I think to the point earlier, I think we'll just continue working with Caltrans around what we can do on their facilities, and especially on El Camino Real, look to the sidewalks. I think that's a fair point, to see where the property lines are, and it may be different in different locations. But I think that's a fair point, and I appreciate you bringing that up.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's also the bike lanes, which, as we know, is something that Caltrans is interested in implementing, but that we have some say-so over as a city in terms of possibly bringing it before this body to talk about those things, or maybe it'll go directly to council about whether we want to rezone and reimagine how the parking is done along El Camino in exchange for bike lanes. And that is in the Caltrans District 4 bike plan. It shows that it's not here. It's going to be in our adjacent cities, but not in between through this city, unless we can get on that. Did the council discuss that recently? Is there any update on that?
The only update I'll have, and maybe I'll defer to Sylvia on this, is I know that the city recently responded to Caltrans's letter, and I think that letter was made public. And I think that's the latest update I have. But Sylvia, feel free to jump in if you have any other updates.
No other updates at this time.
Can you just briefly summarize for the community what we said in our letter to Caltrans?
The letter made several points. I would like to refer to it before I just speak off the top of my head about it.
That sounds fine. We're gonna
So
obviously have another round. You want to pull it up?
Let me pull it up. Thank you.
Okay, great. And then,
Excuse me, meantime, I would just like to alert the Planning and Transportation Commission. I believe this letter was sent, the city's response to Caltrans was sent on November 17th, if you need to consult your emails.
thank you,
Sure.
Ms. French. I appreciate that. And then the other things is regarding the safety goals on slide 16. It doesn't say anything about safety on our bicycle-friendly community review. And as we try to understand what makes a great bike-friendly city, I would think something about it being safe would be helpful for us to measure, understand how successful we've been, which my understanding is pretty successful compared to other communities, but also to have something to aspire to. So I noticed that that word isn't here with the exception of safe routes, and I understand that's not a safety measurement. It's just, do we have recommended routes? So I'm wondering if safety is a goal that we want to describe and aspire to. Is that part of our plan?
Just to clarify, you're referring to the bicycle-friendly community review, right? I don't know if this is an exhaustive list or this might just highlight, those at the top for Palo Alto. I'll defer to Amanda on if safety is a part of the scoring criteria, but just overall from a city standpoint, I mean, every policy document I've read refers to enhancing safety in our roadways for all users.
That's my understanding as well, that
Right.
we have a really good track record there, and I think we need to talk about it, but we need to understand it in terms of what can we improve. So, and to that point, I noticed not on the list on slide 14 is any kind of, unless I missed it, and it's entirely possible, but what are we reviewing from the police? Like in terms of collisions or incidents, and are they with children or with adults?
Are you referring to from the staff presentation, slide 14? Ms. Dow, could you help pull that up for us so that the rest of us can see it?
Thank you. Sorry about that. It's a eye chart anyway, so I'm not sure if it'll help. But thank you, Vice Chair. So yeah, I want to make sure that we don't lose sight of safety in the discussion, because you all are working very hard on it, and our community members on the payback team are working really hard on it, and the school city safety team is working hard on it, and we need to understand it. I remember I went to your meeting in October, and we were talking about recent incidents, and it's easy for our hearts to pour out to people that are affected, but we also have no way of knowing what ways to understand that the frequency and the intensity of those kinds of collisions in context of what's happening on a day-to-day basis. And I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, I will defer to Amanda. I think her hand's up, but I know that maybe Sylvia wants to speak to how we will look at the safety analysis, or safety as well as collision data, as part of our collision analysis. But I know that the safe systems approach really puts that into drive and wants to acknowledge and strengthen the link between the police department, collision data, and traffic safety and infrastructure. So,
Totally agree. I think that's why we need to put it front and center to make sure that we have a clear understanding of why it's important to move that program forward.
right. I don't know if Amanda has something more to add.
Yeah, thanks. I'm glad safety is foremost on your mind. It certainly is on ours too. The slide you referenced first, the lab summary, like Ozzy mentioned, it doesn't include all of the criteria. The gold rate, so I can share that based on that application that was submitted in the past, Palo Alto did have a slightly higher rate of crashes than peer gold cities. But we will be taking a pretty comprehensive look at collision data as part of our work on this plan. And we will have access to police reports, but we'll be looking at like not the most up to date. So I think the latest approved like safety data that we'll be using is from 2021. So there will be a gap in the more recent collisions, which we could close in a number of ways, but I also just wanted to share that. Yeah, that's it.
Did Sylvia have something to add as well? Or I don't want to cut you off.
I don't think I have more to say about the safety. I did present to PTC the safe systems for all.
The previous meeting, yeah.
Yeah, at the previous meeting. So I don't want to go back over that territory. I do have the response letter to the Caltrans letter up if you would like for me to share that information now.
Yes, briefly, that would be fantastic. And after that, then I'm done with my questions for now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So the Caltrans letter explained that Caltrans did a safety audit that led them to request that bike lanes be added to the entire length of El Camino Real in Palo Alto. And the city's response had several questions, including a request for the collision data that was used in the Caltrans report, a request that intersection safety and bicycle amenities be included in their plans, and a request to see the latest plans. There was a question regarding whether or not space for parking or space for travel lanes should be reduced in order to install the bike lanes. There was a question about the continuity of the bike lanes. Did they intend for these bike lanes to go all the way through Palo Alto, or would there be a gap somewhere in town? And there was a question about buffered or protected bike lanes. What was the intention by Caltrans there for what kinds of lanes they were proposing? There was also pointing out to Caltrans that given the ongoing closure of the California Avenue travel lanes to cars, that the left turn from El Camino onto California Avenue is now unnecessary, and that space needed to be integrated into whatever Caltrans is planning for El Camino. And then there were questions about the process for notifying and doing outreach in the community about these bike lanes, and adopting a parking removal resolution for bike lane installation. That's something that we're asking questions about that Caltrans has requested. And yeah, lead time required for community engagement and decision making. They would like for our council to make a to vote about removing parking at some point in April, and we have questions about that and their commitment to providing support for the meetings that would need to occur leading up to that, the public meetings that would need to occur leading up to that. So that is those were the main points raised in the letter.
Thank you for this summary. I just want to say that this would definitely count as a transportation update for the beginning of the meeting. If that's something that monumental just happened with council in the previous intervening weeks. I did realize when you were talking that I had one more question, and I don't know if it's for Oscar or for you, but on the VTA bike plan, or Caltrans bike plan that was referenced, on page 57, there's a rendering of the El Camino at Embarcadero intersection that this document's from, I think, 2018, 2019, something like that. That was a vision that somebody was going to implement that hasn't been implemented. Is that still something we're looking at getting from Caltrans?
So that was actually, if it's the one that I am imagining, it was a city-led redesign of that intersection, and that project is on hold until our grade separation conversation can inform whether or not those improvements can happen there.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay, next up we have Commissioner Rectal and then Commissioner Aiken. And then I would like to just check if we have any public comments, because these are supposed to be clarifying questions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I have one question about level 3 bike lanes. When I look at the map, when I ride on level 3s, they seem like just a regular neighborhood street. So what has to be done to a residential street to make it qualify as a level 3?
Right, that's a good question. I'll defer to Amanda for the technical expertise, but I know there are potential street marking designations such as sharrows, for example, that would designate a street. I know that we're in a current conversation around potentially including a different classification for what's locally known as the bike boulevards, which isn't technically a standard classification throughout California. We have the class 1, 2, 3, 4 that folks are most familiar with. So we are looking to maybe make it context specific, but to your question around class 3 facilities, I will defer to Amanda on the specifications.
Yeah, sure. So that class 3 bicycle lane is a shared lane, and to be a designated bike lane, all that is required is signing or marking. So marking would be the sharrows on the ground that Ozzy mentioned, and marking would be a sign posted on the sidewalk that says bike route.
Okay. So we could really increase the number of bike lanes. Or, yeah, one of the criteria is what's your mileage of bike lanes? And so with a little signage, we could really game the system. Another question on the next item, which is we're not covering right now. One of the programs is on packet page 102. The very last program talks about bike counts, and that's an ongoing program. And I've never seen those. Where are those available? Bike counts of how many bicyclists are using our bike lanes?
Right, I am not well versed in that, but I will defer to Sylvia, the transportation planning manager, if she's aware of the line about the bike counts.
Yeah, so I don't have the packet in front of me, so I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to, but we do conduct bike counts as needed in particular locations for particular projects. So it's just kind of, it's done in our standard work. We don't normally publish them. They're not they're not super useful to just have, because they're just spotted in different places in town.
Okay, but it's associated with projects. It's not just once a year you go out to Bryant Boulevard and count the number of bikes that run by. Okay.
Correct, correct. Though that is something that that is part, I believe, of the scope of the bike plan, is to think about how we could do yearly or some other period of time bike counts to better understand the biking behavior in town. That is definitely something that we want.
Okay, that's something I want to. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Aiken?
Thank you. It seems to me that there's an opportunity here to collaborate with the makers of the commercial navigation apps, not only to make sure that our preferred routes are also their preferred routes, but even to make sure that the facilities inventories are consistent. So is there any interest in pursuing that as part of the program?
From a professional standpoint, yes. I don't know if we're necessarily scoped to look at that as part of this plan, but I think that could make it into the recommendation piece, either as a goal or a program that we develop as part of this plan update.
Great, thank you. For those of you who are not from Atlanta, you may not know about Peachtree City, which is a planned community south of Atlanta that has a completely separate transportation network for bicycles, pedestrians, and golf carts. So when you mentioned the use of alternative vehicles for the network, I'm curious as to whether a golf cart qualifies.
My initial response is no, but I know that we're entering kind of space around fleet types that start to blend a lot of these different pieces. So I think the state is looking to help cities by defining bicycle classification types as well. I know they're doing it with e-bikes, but I did catch that article about Peachtree and flipped through some of the photos and was really inspired. So appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah, it's an interesting place. I recommend reading more about it. Thank you. That's it.
Okay, I have 3 quick questions. So the first one is, I think I heard Ms. Leahy's or somebody say that the website survey is up for 1 more month. Is that correct? Because it was a November 30th deadline, but sounds like you were going to keep it up till the end of the year?
Right. We are extending it, recognizing that we are in the midst of this phase 1 roadshow, going to City Traffic Safety Committee tomorrow, Rail Committee next week. And so we want to make sure that as we're publicizing this effort and really ramping up, that folks still have a chance to complete the interactive map and the survey. So yes, it will be extended through the end of this year, December 31st.
Great, glad to hear that. Then also on packet page 21, this is the Platinum versus Palo Alto chart. Are there examples? It talks about how Palo Alto's bike-friendly laws and ordinances are below average for Platinum communities. Can you give me an example, or what are examples of bike-friendly laws and ordinances that we don't have that we could have? I'm trying to get a sense of what those are.
That's a great question. I'll definitely defer to Amanda on that.
Yeah, so one would be the amount or type of bike parking that's required of new development. Another might be making riding on sidewalks legal, or the level of enforcement of riding on sidewalks, or restricting access to certain places for people walking and biking. We have, I might be able to pull it up, but we have provided a few examples in a technical memo we prepared that identifies a few opportunities. We've also been reviewing the zoning code and have identified a few more based on that review. But that's an example of things.
Okay, great, thanks. And then finally, I think this was sort of answered when Commissioner Rectal was asking questions, but that same packet page 21 refers to a total bicycle network mileage. And so I was wondering what defines bicycle network mileage. Is it the same answer that you gave earlier about having a sign or sharrows, or is it something else?
You want me to take that one? I can say it is all of the bicycle facilities, class 1, class 2, class 3, like regardless of separation. If it is a bike route on the bike network, then it is included.
So if we just put them onto our, I mean, we have tons and tons of neighborhood streets that I couldn't see, I didn't go look at the color view of the map, but they're not clearly included on the map, but yet as a bicyclist, I certainly bike on all of them. And I see, I mean, if we think about where the kids biking to school they bike everywhere. So I'm glad to hear the earlier comment that this number of 80% is not a goal, because I don't see the need to spend a lot of money saying that everything is a bike lane or a bike part of the bike network when it just automatically is, and we don't need to spend the funds that way. But I'm just wondering, if there really is something that we should be doing to make things safer, for example, or to make drivers aware that they're a biker. I just don't know what that number means, and sort of the relevance of having it there, given that it does look like we look so bad relative to everybody else.
I'll
yeah, go ahead.
offer that I agree quality is more important than quantity. And that's one thing we're getting at with the level of traffic stress mapping. I do think that a number of neighborhood streets would be better quality bike routes than ones that might be striped or signed or marked on the network. But yes, also like that is why it's not a target exactly. We'll look at what's appropriate, for the city. Sorry, Ozzy, if I cut you off.
No, that's great. Yeah, I think I was just going to say what's best. And I think folks can ride on what's most comfortable for them, but I think we want to prioritize those facility types.
Okay, thanks. So I look forward to see what we ultimately end up with for this map, because it doesn't, it doesn't quite jibe with sort of what I think the reality is on the ground. And hopefully we have a map that more accurately reflects reality, particularly when it comes to novice riders trying to plan out a path, or when, Google is planning out a path for me to bike. Okay, so with that, I want to see if there's any more clarifying questions, and otherwise just quickly check in for public comments, because I see that we have at least one. So, all right, let's go to public comment, please.
Yes, so we have one in person and one on Zoom. First in person is William Chrisman.
Oh, hi. I don't have any prepared thing to read like Mr. Hurst did, so I'm afraid I won't shine, but
Could you please speak into or move the microphone?
I don't have anything prepared to read, but Mr. Hurst did a nice job there. So first off, I want to say for Amanda, I believe it was, who did a in-school at Juan Briones, I don't know, possibly a month ago, as part of safety education for the kids on bikes. Great job. It was fantastic. She really engaged the kids in a way that's, well, it's hard to do, to talk to kids about traffic safety. It goes right over their head. I believe it was Amanda. I was there. I saw it. She did a fantastic job. And I don't know how much you hear of that kind of thing, so I'm taking the time to say it. And please do more of it, because I'm all about traffic safety. That's why I'm here. If I could refer you to, I'm not sure if this is going to be possible, to the email that I sent to council on May 8th, 2019. Is that possible?
We don't have the ability to easily pull that up.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yep.
So the point of that was about safety on, especially, let's say, routes to school in the Green Acres 2 and Barron Park region. On the ground, I live there. So I like the thinking of Commissioner Templeton and Commissioner Chang. Few people have talked about what's it really like, what's the temporal and spatial reality like day to day right there on the street. And I see it every day. I could tell you what I saw this morning. It would scare you all if you were really listening to what I said in terms of traffic safety for bikes. So back in 2019, I mean, I've been having this conversation with this gang for more than a decade. And all I see is the situation on the street getting worse for the, let me narrow that down. Don't freak out. I'm not talking citywide. I'm just talking about, let's say, the Arrastradero corridor and the neighborhood streets surrounding that lead to Juana Briones and Gunn High School, Fletcher Middle School, and such. Did any of you know those streets? I know that Amanda and Sylvia know them. I've talked to them. I've talked to Mark Hurd back in the day. And Sue Dremen, who's a staff writer for the Weekly, I got her on the phone and she came out and she wrote in the Weekly an article about where egress, forget the fancy words, where the bikes, and there's hundreds of them a day, go into the Gunn High School campus on the pedestrian bike path in the morning, and in the afternoon they come out. And there's many, many hundreds of them every day. So, and there's many, many hundreds of cars every day because the parents don't like, who likes to go on Arrastradero anymore? Basically, it's a broken street. So where does the traffic go? Let me narrow that comment down a little bit. I don't want to offend anybody. You know, it did calm the traffic on Arrastradero, but it made the traffic that goes anywhere else angry in a hurry. And a lot of the cars are going to drop off their students, especially at Gunn High School, where I just mentioned that intersection, or pick them up. So you got tons and tons of cars on the same blacktop as the bikes or the elementary school kids walking, bicycling, or rolling. So Sue Dremen wrote this article in the Weekly, and Wednesday, May 8th, 2019, I wrote a long email to City Council. I know you guys all got the same email. I spelled out pretty carefully in that email, which I have right here, but I thought I'm not going to read it.
Okay, thank you.
But what I
Your
want to
time
say
almost
is,
up, so if you could just wrap it up.
I will.
Thank you.
Back in those days, 2018, 2019, in my conversations with Mark Hurd and Sylvia, I kept on asking, has a traffic temporal and spatial traffic study been done on the neighborhood streets? That's been mentioned. And how the changes on the Arrastradero corridor impacted the neighborhood streets in Barron Park and Palo Alto, Green Acres, and Green Acres 2. And to my surprise, the answer that I got from Sylvia and Mark was that they hadn't done such a study because the council had not asked them to. And I said, well, come on, do it. And that's easy for me to say. But what Sylvia and Mark said was that they couldn't do the study because they had not been asked by the Commission for Traffic and Safety or City Council to do it. So I'm asking a question, if possible. I think if somebody here probably knows, has that study been done or authorized? And if not, why not? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Next is Penny Ellison on Zoom. If you can unmute yourself, you have 3 minutes.
Thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, great. Thank you. First, I want to thank Sylvia Starlack for the information about numbers of bicyclists citywide. So this is something that I've been thinking about quite a lot over time. Excuse me. I'm speaking as an individual tonight, by the way, I should say that. I am very interested in getting some solid counts of the number of bicyclists we have citywide, including all school commute bicyclists, to provide and to look at the injury collisions to get an injury collision rate that's a real baseline that includes all the bicyclists, including school commuting students. I think it would be a very helpful thing to, if we started that this year, so we would have it going forward. We really don't have good, solid citywide bike counts. And I think that would be a very useful thing to have. I think we've made a pretty strong effort to do that for motorists. I think it would be a very useful thing to do it for people who are the more vulnerable road users. I would be interested if we could separate out collisions involving juveniles. That would probably be a relatively easy thing to do, but it would be very interesting to even separate out PAUSD school commuters, because that's where we're going to see the largest number of youth commuters, because they're being encouraged to bike to school. I really want to understand whether our collision rates are going up or down, because that is going to be our strongest indicator of the efficacy of our efforts to improve routes, to improve bike safety education. I mean, we really need this data to understand how well our program is working. So that's something that I would like to see included as a policy, actually, in the next bike plan. Is a policy that requires us to report on collision rates, not just raw numbers, but collision rates. And that really requires us to have rock solid counts of the number of bicyclists, including all of our bicyclists. And I think that's all for now. Thank you very much for your service to our community on this commission. I appreciate it. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Okay, so back to the commission with commissioner questions and comments as you may have them. Let's go to Commissioner Heckman.
Thank you. And thank you to staff and our consultants for starting this work and bringing it to us. Clearly, it's a very comprehensive undertaking. And I'm happy to see the robust community input aspect of it. And I think I've heard from my fellow colleagues and the members of the public some really good input to help us think through what this product should look like when it's completed in, I think, 2025, if I was seeing that slide correctly. And I wanted to ask a general question. I don't know which member of staff wants to look in their crystal ball and try to answer it, but I'm curious. We've got a plan, 2012 plan, and now we are basically doing an upgrade, refining, bolstering. And I'm curious what staff who've been wrestling with this for a while now are expecting to see. What are the significant differences that they're expecting when we get to 2025 and have this new plan compared to the plan we had in 2012?
Right. I can try to just answer that initially as a 2-year employee, but I definitely defer to Sylvia on the longer context for that. I think I'll tell you just from a best practices, cities typically update bike and ped plans on a 5 to 8 year cycle. And typically they're used for grant applications or, again, to provide new policies and programs. And from a practitioner standpoint, I think we have learned a lot since 2012 in the active transportation space. And And so looking at updating it in today's context. So what that means is either mode share changes, technology changes, like I mentioned, e-bikes and e-scooters, different policies that the city might have implemented since our 2012 update and bringing those to light. I know the comp plan, for example, was adopted in 2017 after the 2012 BPTP update. So again, looking at those policies and incorporating them as well. So it expands a variety of topics, not again, but policies, programs, and facilities in the context of today's mobility. So that's at a high level I would answer. And then if Sylvia wants to provide more of the Palo Alto context, I'll defer to her.
Yeah, thanks, Ozzy. That was great. In 2012, protected bike lanes were not really a thing. So that's a humongous change in the bike planning world. At least they weren't really a thing here. And so I think our new plan will probably make recommendations for where those might be appropriate in town. At the time, even sharrows, the markings for a shared lane, those were kind of new. I mean, there's been a lot of change, just to put an underscore under what Ozzy just said. I don't know, Amanda, if you want to say more, but level of traffic stress for bicyclists, I don't know that was around in 2012, or at least we had not heard about it here. So there are really a lot of things that have changed. And so I'm really looking forward to this level of traffic stress analysis that will help us kind of focus in on, where we can make changes for folks so that people have low stress ways to get around town. I mean, some of us feel pretty confident riding on almost any street, but it's important to have low stress networks. I think there's also there's probably going to be a focus on intersections in a way that I think maybe prior bike plans were kind of, maybe didn't focus so much on what happens at intersections and, for example, protected intersections like the one that was just referred to by the commissioner about El Camino and Embarcadero. Protected intersections are something that, weren't really discussed 10 years ago. So at least here. So yeah, there are many changes. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Next, I guess, is a comment and a request. A couple of the commissioners have mentioned that discrepancy we have in the bike miles as a percentage of overall road miles in the city. And when I look at that 80% figure for the average platinum city, and I'm thinking, well, what that has to be is it's basically any road that platinum city thinks it's not crazy for a bicyclist to be on. So like Oregon Expressway, for example, right? Don't bike on Oregon Expressway, right? And there are a few more streets like that, but most of the residential streets, that our kids come out of and ride down, those are fine. And I suspect that these other cities are including all of those. But I appreciate our focus as described by staff that we don't want to be so broad. We're really focused on the high quality bike streets where the kids, as they come out of their homes, are sort of encouraged to go, the bike arterials, maybe you could call them. And I personally don't want us to lose that focus. But I do think that we could fairly simply collect the data of, here, these are our arterials. They're, and whatever that figure is, 33%, right? But we've got another 40% of safe streets that aren't crazy to bike on. And when you add those two components together, which we keep separate, we're going to be up around the 80%. So if we're trying to pitch platinum without selling out to get platinum, maybe that's an approach on that issue. Is just to collect the data, but don't lump it in with what we really think are the places that people should congregate to bike. And then the last comment I had, I think it was at our last planning commission meeting, or maybe the one before that, where we were talking about is it the safe systems? I think that's what we called it, right? Safe systems and how the philosophy is shifting. And the council guidance, like point number 3 was bicycle and pedestrian safety. And some of us commented that in the planning over there, we weren't actually seeing a lot of language about bicycle and pedestrian safety. It was kind of an undercurrent. And my memory is that plan is supposed to be done in 2025, Sylvia. Maybe you can help me if my memory is faulty, but I think that there was a kind of a slow rollout with that was going to be in place in 2025, and we were trying to decide when were we, what's our milestone for having no fatalities. We were talking about 2025 to 2030. But so one thought I had is here we have this bike plan, and we have this related traffic planning effort that are both rolling toward a conclusion in 2025. And the work that this staff is doing on the bike plan, I think can really inform a piece of that safety systems plan. And because, the point of the safety systems plan is it's this sort of consistency from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. It's regional, it's state, it's even federal. But I think it'll be important for us to have consistency between that safe systems plan and our this pedestrian and bicycle plan. And so I would encourage staff, as you're moving on these parallel timelines, but it's the same staff working on both to some extent, to really focus on that cross connectivity. So we can ensure consistency and ensure that the safe systems program really houses the safety aspect of the bicycle and pedestrian traffic plan. Those are my comments. Thank you. Great job so far.
All right, Commissioner Liu.
That was a great segue to my main set of questions. I am unclear how this overlaps with the Safe Streets for All plan in practice. Can you talk a little bit more about how the plans will run in parallel?
Right, and maybe it would be helpful to shift to that slide that has the compare and contrast. Ultimately, as was noted, I think both of these efforts are getting to a enhancement of the safety around just all mobility types, right? I think the way that I describe it to folks, and then maybe Sylvia or Amanda, feel free to chime in here, but the cities have been doing bike and ped plan updates for many decades. Palo Alto initially had its first in 2003 and 2012, and now we're building off of that. So you could consider the bike and ped plan efforts more on the traditional active transportation planning side. The safe systems approach is a new approach. It's federal, and it looks at a more contemporary approach, looking at inclusion of the data and not just looking at bikes and peds, but looking at vehicle travel data. So with that kind of high level context, I think Sylvia or Amanda, if you all defer to you, that was the right slide. You had the right slide. Actually, sorry, it is slide 7 in mine. Right. And ultimately, both will be used for grant applications and to obtain resources to build what's ultimately a projects list. I think to the point earlier, and this is the last bit I'll say, is from a staff level, we are trying to coordinate these two efforts. And an example of that is we have a singular internal staff working group that's made up of a variety of divisions and departments, and it's the same group for both of these efforts. The interactive map and the survey that's available right now is going to be used again for both efforts. So those are ways that we're trying to link these two.
Got it. That's helpful. And the specifics about how the working group is organized is helpful. I was going to ask a follow-up question on how community engagement would work, given that the community engagement and public comments could probably be overlapping, and we wouldn't want people to necessarily give their feedback into one silo and not be heard on the other silo, but that's not going to be a problem because it's all combined, right?
Right, and that's something that we want to reinforce, especially tomorrow with City School Traffic Safety Committee, who already received the Safe Systems presentation, and we're pointed to the interactive map and survey. And we're anticipating them asking a similar question and letting them know that we are collaborating on those efforts to minimize that engagement fatigue.
Okay. I had one more specific question about the working model on the data analysis. I think I heard maybe in response to Commissioner Templeton's question that the bike and ped plan data goes up until 2021. In our conversation, I was just going through the minutes a month and some change ago, we were saying how the Safe Streets for All program had the latest data as of 2022. Is there risk that we are doing two sets of analysis and not sharing the latest or best data across them?
Maybe I'll
misspoke. It's
yeah.
a big solution. I misspoke. We are in fact using the same exact data set and coordinating closely with the other consultant team.
Okay, so the analysis would effectively be the same, and maybe the city would be saving some money by not doing the analysis twice with two different sets of consultants.
It's a subset of the data that we're using. We're only using pedestrian and bicycle involved collisions. So the analysis is separate, but the data set is shared, which is more efficient.
Okay. So then it sounds like there's some risk that the data analysis would substantively give the same results off the same data, and we would be paying for it twice, but I don't know what to do about that. Okay. One more question on the longer term plan for both of these. For Safe Streets for All, I think according to the presentation last time, the timeline was something like September to November of 2024 for the actual plan adoption. Here it's November to May 2025. So there's overlap right there just in November. Can we coordinate so that both plans can be reviewed together and adopted at the same time?
That might be a bit more difficult, just simply because of the schedule and that we've developed. Sylvia, feel free to jump in.
Yeah. Yeah, so the Safe Streets for All plan is, it does have community engagement. It has less community engagement than the bike plan. It's a much more data-driven document. So it's going to finish sooner. It's still going to take over a year. But the bike plan is really about, going to, it's just going to take longer. It has more pieces to it. And the Safe Systems it's a different document, and it has a different budget and is going to finish sooner.
Got it. Thank you. Really appreciate the clarification, and I'll save my overall comments for after other commissioners' questions. Thank you. Thanks.
Commissioner Rechtel.
Okay, a few comments here. Packet page 16, you're talking about all the good reasons to bike. And one thing you don't bring up is it reduces traffic. And so this bike plan isn't just good for bicyclists, it's good for everybody. It reduces the traffic. And even if you're driving, you should hope that there's a good bike lane there because it'll make your drive easier. So I think that's an important context. But another one, packet page 18, you talk about directness. And one big impediment to directness is the rails. We have this huge gap from Calab all the way down to Meadow. And adding bike tunnels or bike bridges across that rail is would be a huge benefit to the bike network. And we don't talk about that at all in here. I'm not sure if you obviously can't fund that, but are you going to be studying rail crossings?
Short answer is yes. They will be looked at as part of the development of the network. But even before that, we received direction from the city's rail committee and the city council to look at specific areas. Seal versus Kellogg comes top of mind. I know we're considering 2 areas around Adobe Creek and then Matadero Creek. So we do have pointed areas that we're looking at for grade separation. So short answer is yes, and that will be part of the overall network discussion.
Okay, very good. That I think is important. Then also, packet page 21, we're talking about all these, we talked about this earlier about network mileage. I really think network mileage is not a good thing. It's not a bad thing to have, but if you have 2 bike lanes very close to each other, they're really not adding anything. It's really the gaps between them. How far do you have to get to a bike lane? And I think that's a better criteria than just mileage. Packet page 23, we're talking about bike unfriendly policies. And it says the city seems to require cyclists to use bike lanes where available. And that's not the case. Unless, Sylvia, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think state law requires that bikes can always use any traffic lane. If they're impeding traffic, they have to move to the right, but they're free. And only bikes can use bike lanes, but bikes can also use car lanes if they want. So I'm not sure exactly what the point of that paragraph was. And then finally, on packet page 14, that map, I live near Wilkie Way and it's not marked, part of Wilkie Way is marked as a bike lane, but it is heavily used by bicyclists, and even though it's not on the map. So I would go back and check the Wilkie Way and see if that really qualifies as a bike lane, because it's heavily used by bicyclists. And that's it. Thank you.
Sorry. Commissioner Aiken.
Thank you. This is a cautionary note related to the integration between the bike and ped plan and SS4A. I always like to draw everyone's attention to the CEQA addendum for the housing element, which shows that our VMT is going to go up 24% over the duration of this project. And proposals like the Molly Stone proposal are pretty strong clues that the vehicle traffic is going to go up even in the AB 2097 areas. So we do have to maintain a highly functional vehicle network. And before I would buy into the idea that we would go for the platinum rating, I would have to have some confidence that we're not compromising the other things that we need to do as part of our overall transportation plan. And safety very much plays into that. I'm thinking, what does the Idaho stop look like in a place where traffic has gone up 24%? And the word that comes to mind is risky. So that's it. Thank you.
Commissioner Templeton.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair. Okay. So I'm going to say some things that will show that I am at heart a skeptic, and it doesn't mean that I don't appreciate our staff and I don't appreciate this program, but I have some questions that have come up through the course of this discussion. So I hope you'll take it with that intention of just clarifying and understanding. I look at some of these numbers like my colleagues, and some of them stick out to me, like high-speed roads with bike facilities. Again, perhaps it's a definition of the word facilities, but El Camino Real, Alma, and Oregon don't have those, and those are our only high-speed roads, 35 and up in the city. So I would say we're 0%, not 80%, and I'm not exactly sure where that comes from. You're welcome to speak to it. I'm going to continue with my comments, and if you want to address that, feel free. Bike plan is current and being implemented. 2012 is a long way in the past. I'm not sure if that is current. We've marked it as yes. trying to get to the bottom of this platinum designation as a goal, being indicated by at least one factor of total bicycle network mileage to total road network mileage. I thought for a minute, I thought this was a typo. Many of us have discussed it tonight, but it is not, in fact, a typo. The only city in California with a platinum road designation is Davis. Because UC Davis, which also has that same designation, is in Davis. So I will reiterate that there are no cities with platinum designation. There are campuses, including Meta campuses, University of California campuses, and others. That's not to say we shouldn't go for it, but it's a completely different type of situation. And we should also understand our stretch goal in that light, because unless we are a university campus that has control over everything in unlimited land, it's very unlikely that we're going to achieve that level of campus zen. I love it. I worked on a campus, it wasn't Meta, I worked on a campus that also prioritized biking and had an amazing bike network. I dream of having Palo Alto being able to implement that, but that is not currently feasible and certainly not for 2023. I also want to challenge the team, because I was researching some of these data points, I learned that these criteria have all changed since 2021 or whenever we got this designation. They've currently been updated to completely different criteria. So I would suggest that from a study session perspective feedback, that we realign when this is brought back up to whatever entity sees it next, possibly want to realign it to orient towards the current application, which has the same kind of stuff that we saw Ms. Sarlacc present with the 5 E's. And I think it was we saw your presentation or presentation at your meeting about that as well. So a lot of this discussion and this detail that we've gotten into, because this particular body, we love detail, may be moot. I would encourage, if anybody wants to see the list of cities in California and what designations they have, it's at bikeleague.org/BFA/award-database. And then you can click on California and I'll present you with a list. Palo Alto is doing really well in this light and understanding, we're on par with San Francisco as far as biking oriented cities. I've always thought San Francisco is very bike oriented. And if we're able to do that here in our less urban environment, that's amazing, right? Yes, we want to push further, but I'm not sure that the presentation included the any peers at all with a platinum designation and what that means, right? So I'll leave it with that. I'm going to sum it back up. I would love to see this presentation be more realistic, and things that are out of line, like high-speed roads with bike facilities, have some kind of explanation. Excuse me. Things that don't make sense need to be clarified in the presentation, because it is somewhat misleading in the way it's currently presented. And I don't believe it's intentional in any way. I'm not saying that, but I would love to see the next version of this be a little bit more clear about what we're aspiring to do, how reasonable it is, and what some of these data points are based on. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other lights, so I'm going to go with some of my comments. So I think you've heard a lot of the commissioners talk or kind of point to a couple points. One is goals. both what, the way that the data is laid out for us, it seems to indicate that being platinum is a goal. And I hope that when, the plan is completed, there's more of a consensus as to what like the goals and the recommendations would actually be for us. Also, I think it would be helpful to understand what the outputs for this project are versus the Safe Streets for All outputs, because I think that might clarify some of the confusion between the two. I certainly support everything that Commissioner Liu said about let's try not to pay two groups of people twice for the same work and make sure that everything is coordinated as tightly as possible. And then I would also reiterate both what our public commenters have both said, as well as what Commissioner Rectal said about the desire for bike counts and some data. I think anecdotally, Commissioner Templeton and I have both heard this, and it's also our own experiences. We Palo Altans know where the trouble spots are. Our public commenters know where the trouble spots are. So a question I have is, what's going to be the output of the interactive map? Is that where these high incident, what was the word?
High injury corridor.
High injury corridor. Because I think what we Palo Altans would like to see is that the data is kind of digested and then read back to us to have some confidence that all the feedback that we've given has been heard and that there's documentation of what we experience day to day, and that somebody in the city staff knows where these are. I'm sure that city staff does know where many of these hotspots are, but we Palo Altans don't know that city staff knows. And so I think that would be an incredibly useful piece of information and data to be read, to have read back to the community in combination with incidents or reports. A related question is that I had heard that there was some collision and incident data that was going to payback, but hasn't been sent to and shared with the PTC. Is this, maybe Ms. Starlack knows about this. Is that information that can also be shared with the PTC?
And Sylvia, I think she's referring to the PAPD police reports provided by Lieutenant Ben.
We would love that because we've been asking for that for years and years and years. And it's now been, I think, at least 2 months since I heard that it was sent to payback. I'd love it if we could get that sent to us as well, since it now exists.
Yeah, so we Raphael is our senior transportation engineer. Raphael Rios is our PTC liaison, and he should be sending those to you. If he's not, then I thought that he was sending them to you, but if he's not, then I will ask him to send them to you. I'm sorry about that. But yes, we are getting them. We are getting them from PD to go to the pedestrian and bicycle advisory committee, and Raphael can also send those to PTC.
I think he meant to, but it probably just fell off his.
Okay.
Oh, really? Okay. My apologies. I didn't see the one on September 6th. Got to check my spam.
Okay.
But he should keep sending them. We would love to keep seeing them.
Yes.
And then as I go down my list, I wanted to make sure that our consultants look at the housing element as part of the document review, because Ms. Leahy mentioned that looking at kind of trying to look into the crystal ball and see where future demand might be is going to be part of the output for the bike and ped plan. And so I think that the housing element and the opportunity sites is going to be really revealing that way. And then finally, Yep, I think that's about it. So does anybody, I don't see any other lights here. Are there any, oh, one more from Commissioner Liu.
Yep, I can give my comments now. So I first just really want to thank staff. This work is really important and we care about doing it well and on an aggressive timeline. Can you pull up the second to last slide in the presentation where there were a bunch of bullet points that we could respond to? Thank you. I agree with others that platinum doesn't feel like an achievable goal. That said, we still should have very aggressive and very objective metric goals. I also don't necessarily think that these metric goals would have to be aligned with the application criteria. As much as I want to go with the application criteria and be graded and aligned with an external body, I'm just pretty skeptical of the system where we claim we have a 76% budget and other cities claim they have 80% coverage. Oh, well, I mean, other cities, the average platinum city claims to have 80% coverage, but there are others outside of California. But yeah, it's like, it doesn't quite make intuitive sense. Santa Monica is way ahead of us, but is also gold. It's just difficult to interpret. And if these applications take significant staff effort, I would ask the city to consider just not bothering to apply at all if we're pulling metrics and trying to crunch numbers in a way that's ultimately kind of going into a gameable system or a system that doesn't really get us anything directly in terms of grants or anything like that. If it takes significant staff effort, maybe it's not worth the squeeze. Okay, on a few things on the demonstrated excellence section.
Can I ask the consultant to respond to that? Because I do know that lab is an industry standard, and I just want to make sure that we highlight and underscore the need and why we're heading in that direction.
Yeah, thanks, Ozzy. I want to say, okay, a couple of things, and to Carrie, your points are well taken. Here, I feel like we are hyper focused on the slide, and perhaps I mischaracterized our use of this tool. The areas that were indicated as demonstrated excellence is based on an old report card. The future opportunities is based on our review of the 2023 updated criteria and our desire to progress towards platinum. The evaluation criteria included in this bicycle-friendly communities application will not be exactly the same as the performance measures we select to evaluate progress of implementing the plan document. We're right now just developing the vision and plan goals, and in a next phase, and we'll bring back to you an opportunity to help us establish more meaningful context-specific criteria and performance measures to evaluate this plan and the city's progress towards achieving a bicycle-friendly Palo Alto. So they will be slightly different. We understand they aren't in complete alignment, and that's why we're making that choice. There will likely be overlap in the hopes of easing an application process should staff choose to do that. The applications, they do ask for a lot, but often it's data that is at hand. So it's, I mean, there's still a decision to be made there. But yeah, I definitely wanted to clarify that. And so this is part of our exercise to benchmark and understand where Palo Alto is relative to peers. So hopefully that clarifies a few things, and definitely appreciate you all digging deep on this too.
Yeah, if I could just add a little bit to that, the application is really, it's kind of a 360 review because local cyclists who are involved in the community are asked to also rate the community. And so while, gold communities might look and feel different, when you look at them on, when you ride on them, but ride in them. But the review is really quite comprehensive and goes into what educational programs there are, enforcement, lots of different things. It's a very, very useful tool for staff. And the fact that the criteria changed, that to keep that, they keep modernizing the criteria, progressing the criteria, is also useful for staff. So I would really hate to not use the league's bicycle friendly community program as because they are doing great work, and it's forcing all of us to do great work and lift all the boats. So so I wanted to say that. And the other larger context of this is something that Ozzy mentioned earlier, is that we need to move the needle on people biking in town if as part of our adopted sustainability climate action plan goals. And this is a great way, using the league's criteria, even if we don't make it to platinum, but just looking at their criteria is helping us, is informing our bike plan. And so, and in the direction that we need to go. Thanks.
Thank you. I appreciate that context. Want to flag that as an option for staff to consider, but of course, staff has way more expertise on the logistics and value of the application and grading process. Okay, won't comment on demonstrated excellence. We'll just comment on future opportunities. These sound like programs that definitely make sense. I think thinking high level about how bike and pedestrian access connects with businesses is also just a broad opportunity area. For actually goaling or measuring on these opportunities, my hope is that we could take direct goals on safety metrics and ridership counts. Yep, and those are my comments.
Great, thank you. So I think that is it for this item. Do we want to take a break, quick break before the next one? Okay, let's take a 5-minute break and then we'll come back.
Thank you so much for your
Okay, we are back. So on to the next item on our agenda, which is an action item. This is a review of the 2023 Comprehensive Plan Implementation Annual Progress Report and the draft 2023-2031 Housing Element Annual Progress Report. So what we need to do is recommend that City Council authorize the transmittal of these reports to the Office of Planning and Research and Department of Housing and Community Development. Could we have the staff report, please?
Yes, so this evening we have Claire Campbell virtually attending, as well as Chitra Moitra. So take it away, staff.
Good evening, commissioners. I am Chitra Moitra, planner from Long Range Planning Section. So this is that time of the year again when you get to do your annual review of the comprehensive plan and the housing element implementation programs. This time the staff is requesting also tonight for PTC to provide feedback and recommendation and authorize transmission of the 2 reports to OPR and HCD. And all PTC comments and recommendations would be included in the staff report, which we are preparing for City Council in March. Next slide, please. The next one. So these 2 reports are required reportings. These are mandated by the Government Code section 65400, where we have to annually report to HCD and OPR on how we have done in the current year on implementing our programs, as well as meeting the RHNA numbers. This reporting is also required by the Palo Alto Municipal Code section 19.4.030, where the PTC gets to yearly review these programs and see how much progress we have made in the current year. Next slide, please. This slide shows the distribution of the existing 2030 comprehensive plan, as well as the newly adopted housing element 2023-2031 housing element, and shows the distribution of the programs for comprehensive plan. It shows the distribution by elements, and we can see that the natural environment element is the one which has the highest number of programs, implementable programs. And for the housing element, we see that these are the 6 major topics, and each of these topics has the following number of implementation programs. And each of these topics does have subcategories, and these programs fall in those subcategories. Next slide, please. This slide talks about the implementation table format. When the comprehensive plan was adopted in 2017, this format was used, and the lead agency or the lead department is the one which is responsible for executing or implementing the plan. We have a column on the timings showing that if the program is a short-term program, a medium-term program, or a long-term program, or a routine program. And the next column shows the level of effort or the magnitude of the complexity, even in terms of cost, how big or how small these programs are. After the adoption of the plan from 2018, when we are doing this annual reporting, staff has added this another column called the status column, which says if the program is complete or partially complete, or it's an ongoing program, and so on. And so for the housing element, we have also maintained the same format, and we are closely following the compliance format so that we'll have some ease of reporting to the APR and HCD. So the next slide, please. So this slide shows the status of the comprehensive plan, what we have done in 2023. And this slide shows that we have completed about 13 programs this year, which is double the amount which we did for last year in 2022. And about 301 programs are ongoing, which says that when you combine the ongoing section and the complete section, which makes up about 77%, and this says that city staff is working on 77% of the comprehensive plan implementation programs. And as for the pending programs goes, the number of these pending programs have also dropped from last year. Last year, there were 85 pending programs. And this year we have 63 of the pending programs, which is a reduction in the number of pending programs, showing that city staff has started working on them. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the implementation status change from last year. In 2022, these are the 41 programs which have changed in their status from 2022 to 2023. And of these, 12 of them belong to the land use and the community design element. And the next is safety and so on. So this slide basically shows that the change in status which these programs went for was mostly about 21 of these programs were in pending state, and out of those 21, 10 of those programs went on to ongoing state, and 9 of them went to partially complete, from pending to partially complete, and 2 from pending to complete. Next slide, please. That was about the comprehensive plan. Now I'm going to talk about the housing element annual progress report. And as we all know that the council had adopted the 2023 to 2031 housing element on May 8th of this year. And staff is now, staff received the HCD comments in August of this year, and staff is diligently working towards responding to those comments and getting ready to finish up the questions asked by HCD or making clarifications to them. And after that, the next stage would be to submit to HCD the staff's report, updated revised element, and then for the boards and commissions to review. We anticipate that in early 2024 or early spring of 2024, council will get to adopt the revised housing element. And as I have said before, this adopted housing element has 122 implementable programs, and the way the reporting is done for the housing element APR, it covers two components. One is reporting on the programs, how we have done, how the city has done on the programs, and the second is reporting on the RHNA numbers. So we keep track of the building permits which were issued for the particular year, and we have to report it to HCD. So these are the two reportings for housing element APR we do every year. Next slide, please. So based on that, the newly adopted housing element, for that, we have completed 6 of the programs already, and we have started working on 15 of those programs. Staff also have identified that of these programs, 26 of them are standard operations or ongoing programs, which you will be reviewing every year. And about 60% of the programs is left for us, for staff to work on them. And we are going to tackle them, next year. Next slide, please. So the next slide shows that staff has already, previously, as I said, that staff has already completed 6 of those programs, and that includes programs 1.1A and 1.1B, which was implementation of the various code changes, which went to the City Council on November 13th. And 26 of these 122 programs would, as I said, was standard operations, and they will be worked on throughout the term of the housing element. And what we have seen based on the time frame, that bulk of these programs would be completed in 2024 and 2025. And as we have said, that the allocation for our HNA allocation for the sixth cycle for Palo Alto is 6,086, and we will be also reporting yearly on the number of building permits issued in order to meet these numbers. Next slide. So this year, up till October 31st, the number of building permits issued was 103, and of these 103, 102 was ADUs, and there was only one single family home which received building permit approval this year. So in a nutshell, this is the achievement for both comprehensive plan and the housing element which we have achieved for the year 2023. So next slide, please. And this is the motion which staff requests PTC to review these annual progress reports and recommend transmittal of these two reports to OPR and HCD. And in next slide, please. And in terms of next steps, we will be communicating all the input which we have received, which we will be receiving tonight from you, and we will be communicating them to the different departments, city departments, forward them and forward any recommendations or changes which you will be recommending tonight to the City Council. And the City Council will be reviewing this item tentatively in March, and the APRs, the two housing element and the Complan APR is due on April 1st of each year. So this concludes my staff presentation, and we'll welcome any PTC questions we have now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Moitra. All right. Looks like we've got a couple commissioners with clarifying questions already. Commissioner Aiken.
Thank you. I've got 5. 3 of these are going to be trivial, but I'm going to do them in packet page order. So packet page 48, program C 3.3.4. So I have read that HCD might be concerned about our fees still being assessed per unit rather than per square foot. So the question is, do we have an estimated date for when the feasibility study will be completed and this will go back to council?
I will defer this question to Claire.
And let me just find that item. Could you please repeat the packet page number again, please? Thank you.
Sure. It's packet page 48, item C 3.3.4.
Thank you.
I think all we really need here is a date. And I'm not
So
asking
I don't know
tonight.
I'm sorry. So we will need to look into the timing of this. I'm not too sure if we have a status from the other departments, but we can look into that and bring that forward. I'm not sure if we have any
Yeah, I
know it's definitely on our to-do list because this is a very important issue with our parkland dedication and how it impacts our development fees. But I don't think we have a specific date defined here in our comp plan.
And also what concerns will be expressed by the public with respect to the housing element. So, all right, that's all we need on that. The next one's packet page 101, item T1.11.2. This is about the expansion of service between Stanford Research Park and the Cal Ave Transit Center. And I was just puzzled here by the odd change from ongoing to pending. What caused that?
That is a program which is Sylvia there? I think Sylvia could have answered this question, but I will get back to you on that.
Okay, it's not important that I know, just that it be documented in what's transmitted. Next one, packet page 106, item T3.10.4. This is the Quarry Road extension. And again, the question is really just, can we document the reason for why this is on hold?
I have to get back to you on that too.
Right. All right, now for two easy ones to wrap it up. On packet page 117 and packet page 137, these are programs 1.4 and 6.4. Both of these have the same problem. They're due by December 31st of this year, but the status is pending or not started. So it sounds like we need an update for these two things. Once again, that's.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, you got them both? That's it for me. That's it for me. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Rectal.
Yeah, great minds think alike. I went through and I noticed that there were 6 programs that are due between now and the middle of January, and they haven't been started. So I was wondering, are we slipping them? Now, one of them we're going to be talking about in 2 weeks. So I think that means that it will be underway. But there, so that is on page 116, and that was program 13A, the very last one on that page. And we will be talking about that, so we can skip that. The next one is on page 120. And that talks about affordability. It's 2.1C. It's the bottom one on packet 120. And that again, by the end of the year, and it's pending, not started. Do we know, is that going to slip? I'm on packet page 120. Is that going to
Yes,
slip?
thank you. I can just respond. So as everyone is aware, we are working on some revisions for some of these programs. So we will be looking at some of these dates, and where we think it's appropriate, we're going to go ahead and make those date changes. And you'll see that in the revised housing element that'll be coming back to you right now, scheduled for February.
Okay. And so the fact that they haven't been started doesn't bother us. We'll slip. They don't seem to be time critical, except for that first one that I talked about.
Right. Right. Yes. And I think, as we all know, we've been working on this for quite some time. So when we initially put that in there, we had higher hopes of getting through some of this work sooner, but we just haven't had staff resources to focus in on it yet.
Yeah, we thought we'd be approved a year ago and we'd be working on this kind of stuff. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I don't see other lights, so I'm going to go right now with a bunch of questions. So on packet page, I have a host of questions that were similar. I did the same thing. I went through everything, and I just want to, I assume that somebody's going to go through the housing element programs with a fine tooth comb, so that anything that says kind of begin implementation in December 23 that's pending, not started, will be revised. Is that correct, Ms. Campbell?
That is the intent, yes. Otherwise, we will see what we can do before January. Yes.
Okay.
We're aware. We're very
just
aware.
looking at the optics, it won't look good, right? If it says that we're going to have done it and we haven't started from HCD purposes, because I went through and I think there were more than 6 of them actually that
we have it.
Yeah. Okay, great. And then I have a bunch of questions about attachment C, which begins on page 144. Mostly about questions about things that were partially complete and then are now ongoing. which seems to make sense to me. But then things like, there were a bunch that were, so if you look at packet page 146, there's S1.5.2. I don't know if is it ongoing or is it complete? Because on one column it says it's ongoing, the other one says it's complete. Yeah.
It was ongoing. You're talking about S1.5.2?
Yes.
Yes, it was pending in 2022, and in 2023 the status changed to ongoing. So this is the last column, that's status change. It should be ongoing instead of complete.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, that one looked like a typo to me. And then on packet page 147, there's a whole bunch that went from pending to ongoing. And I'm just wondering what happened there. Was it just a housekeeping thing where we decided that all of these things were not actually pending, that they were ongoing matters? Or was it that we actually suddenly started working on them?
I think as the departments have pointed out, have designated the status. I think some of these activities were stopped for the pandemic or things like that, and then the work resumed on it. So that's why there has been so much of change in the status reporting this year.
Okay, so you believe it's a reflection of actual change in work and status rather than just housekeeping. That's helpful. Kind of going backwards a little bit, I had a specific question on packet page 145. This is the L10.1.1. It's about relocating the terminal building for the airport. I'm just wondering what it means for that to be ongoing.
I have to get back to you on that too, because this has been, these statuses has been defined by the individual departments.
Yeah.
And
so there's quite a few questions like that, as well as N1.5.1. Like, what does it mean that that one is on? Well, if it was pending before, what does it mean that it's ongoing? So I guess what I'm saying is that I'm guessing there will be some questions like this from City Council, where it's a little confusing what it means for something to be ongoing or what's actually been done on it. Okay. On to packet page 148. So these are a lot of transportation ones, and because we are the planning and transportation planning and transportation commission, I would love to see the next level of detail on a whole bunch of these. The ones that are, like there's one that's, I think Commissioner Aiken may have referred to on packet page 148, T1.11.2, and it was ongoing and now it's pending. So we're wondering about why that is. But on many of the others, I think that the commission would like to know what is the status on these a little bit more specifically. So in the same way that the housing element attachment B gave a little status, there's a little comment, I think, about what was done. Maybe it wasn't the housing element. One of these tables that's in the attachment, there's a little bit of a comment on the status as to what's being done. So if you could pass on to the transportation folks, that we would love a little bit more of an update on where some of these stand that are being worked on.
There are some which are, there is a status column for the comprehensive plan implementation programs too, which is the rightmost column, and some of them provides an explanation as to what is happening or if there was any change.
Okay. That's helpful. That's what I was thinking of. All right. I see that Commissioner Liu has his light on, so I'm gonna let him go for a little while because I have a whole bunch more questions, but we'll come back to me.
Yeah, I have a bunch of specific questions too, but I'll just only ask a couple of framing questions for this first round. So does HCD or OPR actually comment on these transmittals, and what are the overall consequences?
HCD and OPR collates the data from different jurisdictions. That's what they do. You know, when the general plan or the housing element is adopted, like when we list the implementation programs, we are supposed to work on them. That's the assumption. And, you know, yearly reporting of this is what HCD requires the jurisdictions to do. And I'm sure, you know, they at the end of the term, they would see how much of these implementation programs have been actually worked on.
Okay, so we expect them to read through the individual rows and then give feedback to us if they think we're being too slow or if they think 102 units is insufficient. Like would we actually hear back in any way? Or
so
would there
far,
be direct consequences?
If I could just respond, Chitra. So separating housing element from the comp plan, because they really are two different situations completely. The comp plan programs, we don't get feedback from after we send in our report, we don't get a letter saying that, oh, you're running late on certain programs, you know, what's going on. So, you know, at some point, perhaps, you know, this is something really internally for the city to be tracking how we're progressing with the work that we're doing. And maybe at some point in the future, we'll have a specific kind of follow-up to say, you know, City of Palo Alto, you haven't done these things and there are some consequences, but I am not aware of any specific consequences of the city not reaching certain program goals and policies. On the housing element, though, it's a completely different story. There's lots of tracking, there's required reporting, there's thresholds to be met, and there are consequences that come into play. So it's two different sets of protocols for these different annual progress reports.
That's helpful. So we will expect them to look in detail, see if our progress is too slow, see if 102 units feels insufficient, and that would affect their all those other enforcements or potential issues you mentioned would be applied through potential rejection of the housing element again. If they think our plan is insufficient, or is there anything like just innately tied to this report that we're sending them?
I don't think there's anything specific to this report, but there are other implications. So when we complete our housing element in our process, we're getting comments right now from HCD about how we're responding, how we're meeting the thresholds or meeting housing element law, all of those things. And when at the certain point that we do the certification process, once that's done, we know that we have a solid conforming housing element according to HCD. When we do our annual progress reports, there's nothing specific that's coming back related to the housing element, but there are other state legislation regulations like the SB 35 or other things. If we're not meeting certain thresholds for the number of permits that we've been getting out the door and meeting certain thresholds, it impacts some of our development review processes. And I also want to say that for the housing element, they do have another, I'm not sure the entity of this group, but there's a stronger enforcement program that they're going to be looking at the city. So I don't know what that's going to look like yet, but we do anticipate, of course, you know, stronger or more supervision or oversight of these reportings that we do.
Got it. Thank you.
And I just want to add one more thing, just for everyone's benefit. The attachment, the first attachment, attachment A, does provide like staff comments for all of those programs that were listed in attachment, I think, C. So we just didn't include those staff comments in that last attachment, but there are many staff comments in attachment A related to the different programs. But we'll definitely make sure next year we include those staff comments on those other attachments as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Templeton.
Thank you, and thanks for that explanation. I was just thinking back to previous years where this particular action item was very pro forma, and it wasn't a review of how well or not staff is accomplishing the goals listed, but that the report exists. And so I hear that is reflected in your comments, Ms. Campbell. Can you just clarify really directly if you want us to give you guys feedback on these changes, or if you want us to say, yes, there is a report?
Under our local ordinance, the Planning Commission has the purview to provide comments and feedback on these comp plan programs. So that is part of your role if you feel that that's appropriate. So definitely that is the Planning Commission's role. The housing element is, we're in a little bit of a weird position right now because we know we're coming back in February with some revisions and changes. So some of those comments might be more appropriate when we move forward with that. But definitely we welcome any of your comments on these programs, and we can take note of those.
You're very kind. What I'm trying to get at is we have no end of comments we'll give you on these programs. So, what I'm trying to just narrow down, like, do you want us to question the status, or is there some way you can help us scope what you need from us here with regards to feedback on the comp plan programs? Do you want us to say you should do more of this and less of this, or?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay, but not necessarily status, guys. So
yeah,
thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay, Commissioner Rectal. So let's keep it to clarifying questions right now, and then.
I'm done clarifying.
Okay, does anybody have any other clarifying questions? No. Okay, then on to, we need to take public comment. So it looks like we have anybody? Is there anybody? Oh.
No, I have no request to speak.
Okay, fantastic. On to comments then. Go ahead, Commissioner Rectal.
Okay. My comments were on the comprehensive plan programs, and it's a comprehensive plan and it's a comprehensive list. So I guess that's appropriate. And comprehensive lists are good and bad. It lists everything that you might want to do, but it also kind of buries the high priority programs with a whole bunch of just kind of routine tasks. And it's hard to understand what the priority is. And so I think we'd be well served to really identify the handful or 10 programs out here that we really want to give high priority. There is a column that talks about priority, but that's really a time frame. It's not, if I hired one more person, what would I want him to do? That's what I consider priority, and not a time frame. And so I kind of get lost in all this. Do we have any ability to modify that? Not sure. Is this a question for planning or a question for Chitra or Claire?
Yeah, I think, we can definitely take into consideration a different way of reporting out. I think, over these years, we're learning, every year we learn something new about how to report this information out differently, or hopefully better. Every year we get better at it. But even I think as staff, I've questioned, like, is this really the best way to categorize some of this or to prioritize? Does this really make sense? Because back in 2017, it made sense to everybody at that moment, but maybe today it really doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't make as much sense. So certainly you can provide feedback to maybe give some direction to staff on a different way of reporting the information next time. And we can work on that for our next annual report.
Okay. For example, there are some things with seismic improvements, and that sounds really important to me, but it doesn't seem to be a high priority task, which makes me think that maybe it's just kind of nice to have. Or same with backup water or backup power supplies. I would think that those would be like top of the list, and we'd be dropping everything to make sure that if there is an earthquake and Hetch Hetchy doesn't give us water, that we have some capability of providing water. So putting that in perspective, I think would be a good addition. I like the comprehensive list, but I think, like I said, I think things get lost in it. We also have other things. The housing element, we're adding a whole bunch of housing down in South Palo Alto, and there's some programs there that we have to work with VTA to improve public transit down there. We have to plan bike paths. We have to plan parks down there, and those all should be programs. And so that may be next year's iteration, but those are really important topics that we can't just kind of wait on. And some of it, for example, on packet page 61, the bird safe rules, I wouldn't think that that would be much work. And if we're putting up, we plan to have a lot more taller buildings, that we think that we should clarify that sooner rather than later, or every time someone comes forth, we're gonna have to, on the fly, figure out what we want for bird safe. And so considering that we're doing a lot of development, I think going through and identifying those that will shape that development would add to that priority. So that's all I have. Thanks.
Thanks. Okay, Commissioner Aiken.
Right, so I'll start with a procedural question. Since this is the first time I've gone through this exercise, I took seriously the suggestion that we could offer proposals for changes. Now, it was not my assumption that we as a body would be voting on any of these changes tonight, but simply recommending them to staff as potential work items in the future or quick fixes to the document. So is that a reasonable interpretation?
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. And one of my thoughts also when I was doing the same exercise was sort of what do we need to flag for council? Because some of this stuff, if it really is a prioritization, requires dollars, which means council needs to give dollars. So I think that according to Ms. Moitro, she would be passing on everything to both departments and council. So that's how I look at it.
Okay. So I've got 6 of these. I think what I'd like to do is do the first 2 because the remaining 4 are transportation related and probably should be done together. So I'll start with packet page 58, bottom item L4.2.3. This is about explore and potentially support new creative and innovative retail in Palo Alto. So 2 years ago, Cushman and Wakefield did a great study on how retail changes as density increases. Very relevant for us. And the main takeaway for me is that as density increases, retail space per resident goes down. You have to get used to the idea of the retail venues themselves becoming smaller. So the suggestion is, should we consider zoning changes to support smaller retail spaces or spaces shared by multiple tenants as a way of increasing retail support in the city? The next one is on packet page 90. This is S1.13.2. Roughly in the middle of the page. This is about adopting emerging residential off-grid capabilities and technologies. The word microgrids does not appear here, but I think it should, as that's clearly relevant technology, and it is used explicitly in other items in the plan. So so we're aware of the concept. It's just this is a place it should be called out that it isn't. All right, let me stop there because the remaining 4 are transportation related and give everyone else a chance to speak.
Commissioner Templeton? Oh, no, sorry, wrong light. Commissioner Heckman.
Thanks. Let me, I guess, first, a little bit of a clarification, having been through this either 3 or 4 times now. These program texts that, for example, Commissioner Aiken was just recommending a change to. My understanding is this is the program text from our comp plan. And so to change the text here is really to change the comp plan, which I think we have to do in that order. You change the comp plan, and then next year this text gets changed. And it wasn't clear to me if sort of similarly, Commissioner Reckdahl was suggesting something he didn't see here that he thought should go here in the housing element, and that's the same thing. So the housing element that the council adopted over the summer, it has a series of programs. And so if we want to see a program here, we need to communicate to the council, and this is actually a good time to do it, right? Because they're looking at changing the housing element, to make the change there so that staff can pick it up next year in their report to us. So I would suggest on those kinds of issues that my fellow commissioners, and particularly the housing element ones, because that is, I don't know when we're going back for another comp plan change, but they're looking at the housing plan right now. So maybe that's, for Commissioner Reckdahl's suggestion, maybe that's something staff could fold into what they are looking at in terms of the changes to the housing element. Oh, sure.
Sorry, I just want to interject here and be really explicit, because I know we had that little conversation with Ms. Moitra, but changing the comp plan and changing the housing element are not agendized. All that's agendized is this report. Just clarifying.
Okay. All right. So, and I think our comments are consistent, but just to clarify it again, it's because this, the first time you tackle this, and we had a couple commissioners, this is the first time, it's overwhelming. I mean, I remember my first year, just, what do you mean we have 410 programs? You know, we see staff, there's not that many of them. How are they working on 410 things, or 77% of 410 at one time? And that didn't include the housing element. This is the first year that I've been on the commission where we get to see the companion housing element aspect of it. And I will say that in the time I've been on the PTC, and Claire mentioned this, every year we have some comments about format and sort of usability. And every year staff comes back with a better version. And so, for example, attachment C, which is just the table of what's changed, that didn't exist my first year.
Nope.
Right? We had comments, and Ms. Moitra took it upon herself to come back the next year with that document for the first time to isolate, because I remember I thought that's really where the action is, right? Otherwise, you're reading 410 things once a year, and you can't tell what's different, right? And so they've done that, and as Claire pointed out, if you're curious about why the change happened in attachment C, there should be an explanation in attachment A. Sometimes it's not much of an explanation, but so that's something that staff could think about, is just carrying the explanation from A into C, since we're going to be making C, so you don't have to look 2 places, and maybe that'll handle that. Oh, I did want to mention, there were a number of questions that were asked of Ms. Moitra that she has to get back to us on. And that's, I just wanted to say in her defense, that, because this had to be explained to me, tonight she's really the head of the spear, right? She is here representing all the departments that contribute to this. And every department gets to decide themselves when status changes. And they don't necessarily sit down with Ms. Moitra and fully brief her on that. And so it's kind of, it's tough for her to know all of those things. Again, I think she does a great job of corralling the cats and getting this report to us. But that's when she can't answer the question, I think a lot of times that's why. And then the final thing that it's just a correction. And I noticed this from one of Commissioner Aiken's comments on packet page 48. Program number C3.3.4. We've got a couple of dates in there that are about more than 18,000 years in the future. And I'm a big fan of long-range planning, but I'm pretty sure those are typos. And so maybe you could clean those up on the way to council.
Sorry about that.
Some kind of vision.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, so I have a couple comments since I don't see any other lights. Yes, I also wanted to thank Ms. Moitra for the attachments. They're actually really, really useful this year, and I was able to get to kind of the big questions, some of the big questions that I wanted to ask. So what I did was I looked through the prioritization, as Commissioner Reckdahl pointed out, is more of a timing issue. And that's just by nature of how we, the city, created the comp plan. But as I was looking at kind of what to flag for council, which is how I approached this exercise, it's if something's short term, it's supposed to be done in 5-ish years. So we're already past that, which means if we haven't done it, we should be making a conscious decision not to do it. Meaning if it's staying in pending, is it staying in pending because of lack of funds, which I saw was flagged as one of the items, or is there something else going on? And so, or is it staffing, for example? And so I did have kind of a question because I looked at how many of the things in attachment. I noticed that there were a large number of items in attachments. Attachment D, which are the pending items that were transportation, like a disproportionate number of them were transportation related items. And again, because we are the Planning and Transportation Commission, I wanted to focus a little bit on that and was concerned that there's also a bunch of items that are listed as R priority, which is supposedly a routine priority that are also pending. So I don't think that, Ms. Moitra, I don't know if you can help answer this question. Like, can you tell us a little bit more about some of the thinking that went into the R prioritization? Because I don't remember seeing that in the past, or maybe I just didn't read carefully enough. But it concerned me that there were supposedly routine things that we thought were kind of no big deal that maybe we're not doing.
Yes,
I can't speak to whether or not it is important or not because I don't. We don't have the relevant staff member here. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, again, these statuses or these priorities, as Claire said, was given in 2017, and at that point, that was maybe that was a routine action or priority was not that. So these things change over time, and that's what is reflected here, I guess. We need to change or, we need to make the routine, higher priority or something like that.
Right. So I think that would be my biggest flag to council is to take a look at the things that have, short term, which means less than 5 years, which means should have already been done and isn't being touched. It might be intentionally not being touched, which is fine. Or they just might have fallen to the wayside for some reason. And that would be concerning if they're actually important, if it's important that they're done. And I also wanted to flag several safety related things that me personally as a commissioner, since we're supposed to talk about prioritization, seemed that they should be high priority. So one was the backup, in case of emergency, it was internet for first responders. I'm trying to find the item. I have too many. There it is. Packet page 165. 3.12.3, like I would give pretty strong feedback actually that seems important because for the next natural disaster or disaster, whatever it is, we need our first responders able to communicate with each other. And then similarly, as the Parking and Transportation Commission, packet page 160, Planning and Transportation Commission. Sorry, I'm tired. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Templeton. Packet page 169, T6.1.3. There's an item that's called Address Pedestrian Safety Along Alma Street between Embarcadero Road and Lytton Street. It was supposed to be a short-term item and is currently pending. And I'm, I guess my feedback would, I wish they were here, but please, please, please incorporate that in the 2 projects that are being done, the Safe Streets for All, as well as the bike and ped plan. And hopefully we get action actually on this item, since 6 years ago, we thought it was important for it to be done. I just don't have any context for this item. So those were the 2 I wanted to flag. And in general, I think I have questions about why it is that there's so many short-term items in the transportation bucket, that short-term and routine items in the transportation bucket that are pending. I'd love to ask the transportation team also, but wanted to kind of make that a matter of public record as well. Does anybody else have any other comments?
Could I just take a quick moment to interject if I could? Sorry. I would just like if there are any actual specific recommendations for changes to the text and priorities, we would need to have the commission vote on that to bring that forward, because you're essentially kind of initiating a change to the housing element document, or not housing element, the comprehensive plan document. So we do want to have a majority consensus or majority vote to say that, yes, we should look at these things and make these changes. And then we can bring that forward to the council as a planning commission recommendation for making these changes.
So point of clarification, like if we actually changed what we would be recommending is recommending that we think about making a change to the comp plan, correct? Because we're not actually allowed to make changes right now. It's not agendized.
Yeah,
that is
so
correct.
yes,
It's not agendized, so we should not go down that path. However, if there's some, and sorry to jump in, Claire, but I think if there are some recommendations on formatting, as we have over the years modified formatting to bring to this commission, I think that feedback is welcome and part of this item tonight.
Yeah, I don't think we need to vote on that then. But I mean, do we need to vote on, kind of our comments, which are, hey, city council, please take a look at these items? I think that the report seems accurate. I'm not saying that we should change the report. It's just pay attention to these ones. Like, do you really want to leave them as is, or do you want to fund them?
So I guess I'm not sure a vote is required either for flagging things like that. I mean, typically when we send something to council, we'll also send the commission minutes. So, if there's a desire to do some kind of straw poll, I think you can do that, but I don't think it's required.
Commissioner.
Oh, sorry.
So Commissioner Lewis is like. Okay, so then Commissioner Heckman?
Yeah, so what we're agendized and tasked to do tonight is recommend the transmittal of the report, period. But I do think that staff in their report to council on this report, when they're describing the planning commission discussion, has heard these concepts and can include that these items were raised by the commissioners as concerns and things that the council may want to look at, right? So it's not a motion, it's just items of concern that yeah, that various commissioners want to bring to the council's attention. And so I think that way we stay within our agenda item, but also communicate effectively with the council.
Yep, sounds good. Okay, so Commissioner Liu, you have your light on?
Yeah, thank you. I think all the clarification has been helpful. I'll try to keep my comments on what is agendized or is in scope, which I think largely is the priority and the comments and the organization. I think it would be helpful, in addition to having clear prioritization, indicate which programs are kind of de facto deprioritized, even if it's not an actual change to the comp plan or housing element. There's some programs which, or a bunch of programs, which I think are a bit misleading to have scoped as is, and maybe there could be an additional filter or additional report we give to council that clarifies things like that. There are a bunch of examples which I can send offline, but like, for example, there's one on page 122 where we have program 3.2, which is to, let me pull this up, which is to continue to monitor new local policy initiatives for effectiveness in combating identified constraints for housing development. You know, this was probably a mistake to have in the housing element to begin with, because it's kind of meaningless in terms of what we would actually do there. But when we tried to summarize our progress for at least our awareness, there should be a prioritization column with some indication of whether things are actually actionable or kind of de facto deprioritized. There are a bunch of examples throughout the document where the comments reference another program and how the comp plan program is kind of rolled into another program and should kind of be disregarded almost. And I think it's just so difficult to interpret when there are all those kind of side references to other programs. And maybe there's a layer of cleanup and abstraction we can do on our own. Some also scope for prioritization, because that is in our scope. There are a lot of programs that reference CalAV, and the pedestrianization of CalAV obviously is an important priority and a huge change. Perhaps we can fold that into one of the already addressed programs and change the priority for that to be a short-term immediate project. Similarly, I think there's a program on page 63, L 9.6.1, which talks about allocation of public space and improving parks and things like that, and maybe increasing the priority of that from medium to short term is the right way for us to, like, I guess, just declare our prioritization for improving San Antonio, because that program, I think, could reasonably incorporate everything we'd want to do in San Antonio. So I have a bunch of other specific comments like that. I'll actually just try to transmit them offline, I think. I did have a couple of actual questions on programs I wasn't sure how to interpret, though. On page 37 on program 8.1.1, there's a mention of how office space has declined by 32,000 square feet. Is there any context on that number? Is that part of a trend that's actually worth noting, or is that some kind of temporary fluctuation as something gets knocked down and reconstructed or something like that?
Can you please repeat the packet page number again and the policy number?
Yes,
Thank
packet
you.
page 37, policy B 1.1. So the very first one, actually, on in the entire attachment A.
So typically what that's referring to is that maybe we had a project that came through and there was demolition. And I apologize if you said this already or you were asking this question, but we probably had a replacement project that came through. And in that process, there was a net loss of office square footage as a result. And maybe there were multiple projects related to this. I wouldn't know without having to look specifically at the permits that were or the entitlements that went through to give you the specific details.
Yeah. I mean, if it does turn out that over the last couple of years or year over year, we are chipping away and losing office space, that is really notable and really interesting for us to discuss. Did you have a comment?
Well, West Bay Shore.
Oh,
West Bay Shore, we lost more than 32,000 of office space where we put up townhouses now.
okay, that's
And so
useful.
that by itself could be the reason.
Okay.
We've been adding office space still, so I don't think we're in a long-term decline.
Yeah. On page 55, program L2.4.2, the Stanford Shopping Center housing is described as partially complete. Is that just referencing that it's in the housing element and so there's some progress here? Or is there any substantive discussion? So that's
L2.4.2?
yes, packet page 55, allow housing at Stanford Shopping Center.
We do have, so as the staff, the notes there, it does reference that we do have a program in place for addressing this particular topic. And, you know, to be frank, there's been ongoing discussions with the shopping center about this whole potential housing development. So it's been an ongoing conversation that's been happening, but we do have it in our housing element specifically as a program. So that's why it's called partially complete, because it's in progress or we're working on it.
Okay. I think if you flip to the program 1.5 in the housing element, which is on packet page 118, it says that that is kind of pending and not started. So I think there's just a disconnect. If there's anything interesting to note about discussions with Simon Properties, I think that's very interesting to me at least and worth flagging. And so also there's just potentially discrepancy here of it being partially complete in the comprehensive plan and maybe not started in the housing element. Okay, that's all for now.
All right, Commissioner Templeton.
Yes, I was wondering if we could just move the staff recommendation.
Second. Are there any comments? Further discussion? Okay, Ms. Dow, can we take a vote?
Commissioner Aiken,
Yes.
Vice Chair Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner Heckman,
Yes.
Commissioner Liu,
Yes.
Commissioner Rectal,
Yes.
Commissioner Templeton,
Yes.
motion carries 6-0.
Wonderful. So we're on to approval of minutes. So we have 2 sets of minutes we need to approve. The first one is approval of the minutes, the draft verbatim minutes of October 11th, 2023. Do I have a motion?
Move approval as revised.
Second.
All right. Ms. Dow?
Commissioner Templeton,
Yes.
Commissioner Rectal,
Yes.
Commissioner Liu,
Yes.
Commissioner Heckman,
Yes.
Vice Chair Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner Aiken,
Yes.
motion carries 6-0.
All right. And now on to the draft verbatim minutes of October 25th, 2023.
Move approval as revised.
Second.
Ms. Dow?
Vice Chair Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner Aiken,
Yes.
Commissioner Heckman,
Yes.
Commissioner Liu,
Yes.
Commissioner Rectal,
Yes.
Commissioner Templeton,
Yes.
motion carries 6-0.
All right. And for our final item of the night, Commissioner questions, comments, announcements, or future meetings and agendas? Anybody? I think we're all ready to go. Okay. No lights, no comments. So we are adjourning this meeting. Thank you.